Okay, here we are. So, jumping right in, my name is Hope, and I am one of the wellness specialists here with the state of Vermont. I'm also a registered dietitian, and so this presentation on healthy holiday nutrition will be coming from my background in education as a registered dietitian. And the goal of this presentation is to help us to frame our mindsets to make the choices that are going to allow us to feel our best during the holiday season. So here at LiveWell, our number one goal is helping you feel your best. So this presentation will be full of tools and knowledge to empower you to make those choices that are going to help you to feel your best. All right, so here's our agenda. We'll start off talking about the why. Nutrition doesn't start at the point where we put food in our mouths. It actually starts way before that point, before the food gets to your fork or your table or even into your house. And that is what makes nutrition so dang complicated. There's just so many things that come before that first bite that led you to make that decision. And that's why it's such a complicated topic. If nutrition just started with eating, it would be a whole lot of a simpler conversation. So if you really want to make healthier choices during the holiday season, you have to rewind that timeline, dial back a little bit to get to the root of what made you make that decision. And that's always true of nutrition, but it's even more true during the holiday season. I think of the holidays as being kind of like a petri dish of our normal life. It's like everything from normal life concentrated down and made much more intense. So it's the most extreme version of food-related decision making around the holidays. So it's a good time to practice thinking about how you're making those eating decisions. All right, so after we talk about the why, we'll hear some tips from our bodies. So these are the tips that our bodies would tell us if they could talk to us and let us know how they wanted to be treated. So we'll hear from our brains and our hearts in addition to our stomachs. If nutrition was as simple as just what went into our mouths, we could talk the whole time about tips from our stomachs. But it's a whole lot more than that. So we also have to hear from our brains and our hearts about what influences those food decisions. All right, so let's start off with the why. So, why is it so dang hard to eat healthy over the holidays? And when I said the why, I bet you were thinking about maybe why it's important to think about nutrition over the holidays. Maybe you were expecting some statistics on holiday weight gain or average increase in heart attacks or something like that. But what I actually want to talk about first is why it's so hard to make food decisions during the holidays. So go ahead and put your answers in the chat box of why you think it's really difficult around this time of year. Anybody have any ideas of why it can be so hard? Nostalgia, that's a great one. Yeah. I'm surprised that nobody has. Oh, here we go. People are typing now. People bring you things they want you to try. Absolutely. Yeah, things to get you in the holiday mood. Too much, too much food, maybe, too many gatherings, too many options. It's cold and hot chocolate. That's a great one. The way to celebrate, absolutely. One thing that we hear a lot is temptations. There are a lot of temptations around, right? People bringing you things, the hot chocolate, all the options, all the celebrations. And a lot of the messages that we hear about temptations are we need to resist temptations and stay strong, or maybe even remove the temptations, get those cookies out of your house. But that's really not the whole story. That's not enough advice to actually help us. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper. One of the other main reasons is stress, right? There's a really heightened emotions around the holidays, and that can lead to some emotional eating. So we're actually going to spend a lot of today's presentation around stress and emotional eating to give you those tools to take care of yourself so that it doesn't come out in the form of emotional eating. And then the last one that I think is often forgotten is the messages that we hear from society about being healthy around the holidays. So that is actually where I want to start and explore a little bit about what do we hear about what it means to be healthy during the holidays. So what have you heard from the media? You can put this in the chat box. What have you heard from the media, maybe celebrities or people closer to you like coworkers or family or friends? What does it mean to be healthy during the holidays? And you can feel free to do a quick Google search if there's like an image that comes to mind or a quote that you've heard. What are we hearing about what this means during holiday season? Oh, nice. More is hearing about balance. That's awesome. But afterwards, you can't eat all the stuff you did through December. Yeah. So, like in December is a time to kind of like celebrate. And then after that, you have to kind of be good, so to speak. Yeah. So when I think about messages that our culture sends about being healthy, I kind of think of them on two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So on one side is the nice side, and on one side is the naughty side. And on the nice side, it means you have to use your willpower and be strong and avoid all the temptations and stand up for what you need. This lady's saying, slay the holidays, come work out on the beach with me because we're going to be healthy during the holidays. And then on the other side of the spectrum, like Morris said, is the indulging side, right? We're all going to overindulge. The story's already written. No way getting around that. You hear things like calories don't count on Christmas, or it only happens once a year, kind of like Hallie was saying, or maybe eat, drink, and be merry. Those are all things that we're hearing. And I'm surprised that Morris said balance because I don't really hear a lot of that around this time of year. I hear either stay strong or too bad, nothing you can do about it. These kind of opposite ends. We do hear some of these middle messages about moderation, but that's not really what I've heard people screaming from the rooftops because moderation doesn't always get a lot of attention in our culture. So, if we're getting these messages from either side of the spectrum, I do want to point out neither of these is necessarily wrong. It's just maybe not the most supportive or helpful way to think about nourishing our bodies during the holidays. And if you hear messages on both sides of the spectrum, it can kind of let us ping back and forth between one side or the other. So one day you might be thinking, I'm going to start off with willpower and being strong. And by the end of the day, you're in a food coma saying, well, I guess not. And then that back and forth sort of thing can make us feel confused or um, maybe ashamed or a little guilty about the choices that we've made. So I want to break down both ends of the spectrum a little bit and then kind of talk about how we can meet in the middle. So on the willpower side, willpower works until it doesn't. So if you're focusing solely on willpower, there's a really good chance that you're ultimately going to fall off the wagon. And when that happens, we sometimes blame ourselves, we get disappointed, we experience that shame and guilt, which are just not good feelings. Maybe believe that we're not strong enough or don't want it enough. Because this idea of willpower leaves out those factors beyond our control. It's this idea that willpower comes from within and you have to do it all yourself by being strong. And it doesn't take into account our environments or the people around us, the social pressures, the expectations, the emotions. Um, and so willpower in itself, isolated, is kind of an unrealistic ask of ourselves during the best of times. And during holidays, when everything is kind of that concentrated petri dish, it is maybe borderline cruelty to rely on this willpower. So this presentation, we want to be talking about some of the ways we can modify those external factors so it doesn't boil down to just willpower, because that's probably not fair to ourselves. Okay, so that's the willpower end. The other end is this overindulging end. And before I break down the causes and effects of the overindulging, I do want to acknowledge that overeating does happen. It might even happen to you. It might happen to me. And if it happens, that's okay. If you overeat, it's not the end of the world, but it might not feel great. And that's what we are all about here at Live Well, is how to feel great. So we want to talk about limiting the overindulging from the point of view of feeling good after the fact. So overindulging. Some of the causes, obviously stress and emotions. It's a tough time of year for some people. The one that I want to focus on a lot is this feeling of scarcity. And it goes back to what Hallie just said about how you can indulge for December and then after that it's all over. It's kind of this like diet starts tomorrow mindset where today is the last day that I can enjoy myself. And then after this, it's a new year and we're going to go on our diets. That feeling of scarcity can actually lead to more indulging. So breaking that mindset is really challenging, but it can actually help you on this end of things too. And then the last bit of causes is that lowered inhibitions. I'm not sure what's in those pictures over there, but a lot of times alcohol can lead to us making choices that might not feel good, and then being distracted by all the hubbub can also cause overindulging. So what happens when you overindulge? That shame and guilt comes back. It doesn't feel good. Those aren't good feelings. You might have physical discomfort if you're wearing your best trousers to dinner and they're too tight. That won't feel good. Digestive distress, I'll say no more. And then health problems. If you've got diabetes or a heart condition and you need to watch your sugar or your salt and you eat too much all at once, it could lead to things that ultimately don't make you feel that great. So overindulging, these unfortunate side effects will make you feel not great. You'll be okay, but you won't feel your best. All right, so those are the two opposite ends. And in the middle, it would be really great if we could just kind of take a moment to acknowledge that holidays can be hard. Holidays are intended to bring us joy during these dark and cold months, food, family, bright lights, things like that. But there's a lot of pressure to kind of pull off that perfect holiday or live up to those traditions. I know that Sophie brought up the idea of nostalgia, wanting to have it feel the way it did when you were a kid. We can often feel disappointed by how things actually turn out. So it'd be really nice, instead of thinking, am I going to be naughty or nice this year? It'd be nice to think, how can we show ourselves more love and be gentler and kinder to ourselves and the people around us? All right, so I've been talking a lot about stress. So I want to kind of open it up and let's get it all out there. Let's put some things in the chat box that cause stress during the holidays. Doesn't necessarily have to be things that stress you out, just things that stress out people in general. Too much to do, making time to see everybody, absolutely. There can be a lot of pressure for that perfect holiday, that family time, all these expectations. Pressure to be happy can actually make it harder to feel happy. Sophie brings up traveling during the weather. Yeah, that's definitely a concern this year. That pressure to feel happy can make it feel like, why am I not feeling that happy? What's wrong with me? And yeah, more talking about getting it right, the right presents, the right food. Absolutely. So all of these stressors are definitely real and they're definitely heightened during the holidays. So let's start talking about some coping mechanisms. Definitely money, yeah. All right, so coping mechanisms generally fall into two categories. And a lot of times we can label these as healthy coping mechanisms and unhealthy coping mechanisms, but let's kind of move away from that and talk about the ones that are going to be productive and the ones that are not so productive. So let's start off hearing some productive coping mechanisms. There's a picture there if you want to cheat. This lady's got a really nice view out of her really nice apartment. That would help me feel better for sure. Ooh, Sophie's coping mechanism is getting enough sleep. That's awesome. I'll share mine. I think that going for a run is probably my number one coping mechanism, but that's not the same for everybody. Everyone's got their own things that work for them. And while going for a run is a way for me to burn off steam, it might be a huge cause of stress for someone else. Ooh, I like that, Hallie, getting yourself a gift. And more is getting outside. Totally. So what all of these coping mechanisms have in common is that they help you feel better in the long term. They help you feel better after you stop doing the thing that you're doing. And they also can sometimes get to the root cause of why you're not feeling quite so great. All right, now the fun one. What are some unproductive coping mechanisms? Eating more sweets. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And that's what we're talking about in this presentation, right? Nutrition. So eating sweets is definitely a coping mechanism for lots of us. Blowing your budget. Ooh, ouch. Yes, definitely. So the thing with the unproductive ones as opposed to the productive ones is that you might feel worse later. So in the moment, you're going to feel better while you're eating those sweets or spending that money. Sophie, drinking eggnog if you have an intolerance. Uh-oh. Okay, so the unproductive ones also have this function of numbing our emotions. So that eggnog and those sweets, so what that's doing is really allowing you to not feel your emotions. However, the thing with coping mechanisms in general is that they all work. All of these coping mechanisms make you feel better in the moment, and that's why we do them. And that's why it's important to think about your coping mechanisms. But we want to think about the ones. The question is, which of these are the ones that are going to let us feel better after we stop doing the thing? All right, so now we're going to transition into our nutrition tips from our body parts. Believe it or not, our bodies do want to be respected and cared for. So these are the tips that what our body parts might say if they knew that we were listening. So any tips that come from our brain are going to have to do with logic. Any tips that come from our heart are going to have to do with emotions. So that's mostly tackling that emotional eating piece. And this is our metaphorical hearts, not our cardiovascular hearts. And then the last ones are from our stomach. So these are tips to do with hunger and fullness, satisfaction, balancing enjoyment and nourishment, and kind of fully celebrating the season. And we're going to mix these up. These aren't going to go in any order. We're going to jump around and make it interesting. All right, our first tip is coming from our brain. Some of us might be really familiar with the concept of using food to help us cope with our emotions. So this first tip, you might wonder why we're talking about emotional eating from our brain before we're talking about it from our heart. And that's because to address it from our brain from a point of logic, we're going to start by defining it. So emotional eating is basically using food to numb your emotions. You don't have to say anything in the chat box, but if you've got your camera off and you want to like raise your little hand if you've ever done this before, definitely something that most of us are familiar with. So to look at this from a logical point of view, instead of using that food to numb your emotions, try to identify and fill the need that you actually have. And this is where it turns into a little bit of a puzzle, right? A logic puzzle. You're trying to hunt and find that need that you actually have so that you can really address it. So for example, if you're at a party and you're going to look for a cookie, do you really need the cookie or do you need 5 minutes of peace away from everybody? And be honest with yourself, because maybe it really is the cookie that you need, but maybe you actually just want a moment to yourself, and stepping outside for 5 minutes would actually make you feel better than bopping into the kitchen to get a cookie. So that's how you can use logic to look at emotional eating. There's always some sort of need under there. And if you don't actually address that need, you're really doing yourself a disservice by numbing those emotions. Okay, now we'll address emotional eating from the heart. So the opposite of numbing is feeling, tuning into your feelings. But staying present with your emotions is a really good antidote to emotional eating. So allowing yourself to feel your feelings, it can be hard to fit in time to do that during the holidays, but even a really brief check-in to say, okay, what am I feeling in this moment? And just name it can be really beneficial. And maybe even you can set a timer. If you identify, I'm feeling really disappointed by how that party went, set a timer, feel disappointed for 5 minutes, and then once those 5 minutes are up, just move on. Feel your feelings, take a break, and then move on. Okay, next one is a tip from our stomach. This is my favorite nutrition tip, and that is eat food. Eat regularly and try not to skip meals. When it's really, really busy during the holiday season, it can be easy to just kind of like forget to eat lunch. Feel free to put your favorite really fast, quick, grab healthy lunch in there in the chat box if you have any ideas you want to share. So one reason that people skip meals during holidays is because you're just too busy to fit them in. And another one is if you know that you're going over to your aunt's house for dinner and your aunt always does a big feast, sometimes people sort of bank their calories for later. So you say, I know Aunt Susan always has tons of food. I'm going to have a really small breakfast and skip my lunch. That's going to set you up for that overeating. It's going to put you into this really hungry stage where you're not going to care what it is and you just want food. Maura's suggestion for a quick, healthy meal is yogurt and granola. I love that one. That's one of my favorites also. So nourishing yourself is basically just taking the time and space to honor your hunger and fullness. So when you're hungry, honor that and eat. And when you're full, feel that fullness and then move on. All right, next tip comes from our stomachs as well, and that's give veggies a place at the table. Making the healthy choice the easy choice. If your veggies aren't there, it's going to be a lot harder to eat them if they're not within view. So thinking about where you can sneak them in, whether that's including them in your appetizers, maybe if you're doing like a bunch of dips and crackers to have some cut up veggies along there, or if you're having one tradition in my family is to have breakfast tacos on Christmas morning, and we always put in tons of veggies, maybe it's leftover broccoli or some sliced red peppers into the scrambled eggs, just so that you're kind of squeezing them in everywhere that they can fit. Your options are to make them simple, super easy, raw veggies, simple roasted veggies, or sauteed veggies, or make them fun and exciting. And figure out which one is going to be more helpful. Is it more helpful to just get them done and make them easy and check it off? Or is it more helpful to kind of have fun with them and maybe try a fun sauce or use a spice that you don't usually use? Or these pictures on here aren't the most beautiful photos, but I really like these ideas of making them festive and exciting. So there on the bottom left, there's a Christmas tree made out of broccoli with some cauliflower for snow. And in the center, there's a menorah made out of all sorts of vegetables. And I think it's fun to make them seasonable and exciting. Sophie swears that people eat more veggies when they're cute. Yeah, and if you have more ideas, feel free to share them. It is okay to play with your food. They always say don't play with your food, but it's fun. It's okay. All right, our next tip from our stomachs is to savor your treats. So take a minute and kind of reflect on what does it feel like to be satisfied from eating a treat? What does it feel like in your body or in your mind? What does that mean to you? And when you're thinking about treats, how do light treats or maybe healthified versions fit that satisfaction? Because these healthified treats, like using a healthy recipe for something that you really like, can have its place, but I do caution you to really zone in on your motivations for healthifying something and thinking about what you expect that end result to be. And is that healthified version going to satisfy you in the same way? And if yes, then absolutely. But sometimes you're not going to feel satisfied unless you eat the real thing. And sometimes having these like light treats can actually make you want to eat more of them because you're like, why am I not satisfied? I guess I'll have another helping. And then you might end up feeling really full and not that great anyways. So if you do decide to healthify something, I encourage you to just pick like one or two things from your table to healthify and then kind of let everything else stand as it is. Because denying yourself the real thing doesn't always lead to real satisfaction. Sophie's putting a note that healthified treats can be great or gross. There's a range. That's absolutely true. And that's actually my next question is, does anybody have any healthified recipes that they really love? Are there things that you really like? I can share mine. My favorite healthified swap is using yogurt instead of sour cream. I really like the tang that yogurt has, and it's a lot healthier to do yogurt instead of sour cream. Any other healthified suggestions people want to share? I'm not trying to knock down healthified things. I just want to make sure that people are experiencing the satisfaction that you expect during the holidays. Sophie likes the Snickers made with dates, peanut butter, and chocolate. Those are awesome. Those are delicious. Oat milk, hot cocoa with dark chocolate. That absolutely counts. Yes, absolutely. Dark chocolate's got health benefits for sure. All right. So let's keep moving. We got 5 minutes left. So with savoring your treats, try to move away from that guilt so that you can truly enjoy the experience of the treat. All right, next one is from our brain. This is the logic one, talking about sending the messages you want to hear. A lot of times around Christmas, you're seeing people that you haven't seen in a long time, and it can be really tempting to comment on people's changes in body size and shape. So even if you notice that somebody's lost weight and you're giving them a compliment, oh, you've lost weight, you look great. You're kind of implying that they maybe didn't look good before they lost weight, or if they gained the weight back, they won't look good anymore. Plus, you might not know the reason they lost weight. It could be depression or stress or sickness. This is a movement that's coming up in our culture to move away from talking about, these diet conversations like, oh, I better, watch what I do tomorrow because of what I've eaten today. This is something that is not actually that healthy. And so trying to move away from that and set an example to future generations that we can talk about other things besides, our body's sizes. All right. Setting boundaries, same thing, making it clear that you won't engage in certain topics of conversation. I know that these are looking a lot like emotional wellness tips, but these are actually nutrition tips too, right? If the conversation is going in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, sometimes that is not very healthy for our decisions either. Anybody have a good conversation shifter when things start diving towards, politics or something you don't want to talk to? I don't always like to admit it, but I'm from Texas, and so it's an easy answer to say, how about them Cowboys? Oh yeah, things that the dog does. That's a really good one. Pets are always a safe topic. Awesome. Another thing that can be really helpful when you're experiencing a lot of family and conflicting points of view is finding a buddy that you can vent with. Getting that validation can be very helpful. All right, here's another one of my favorite tips from our bellies, and that is to swap out alcohol for something that's exciting and festive. So one idea might be mocktails, or if you'd like to have tea. If anybody's got any favorite mocktail combinations, that can be really fun to share. A lot of families kind of sprinkle the alcohol all the way through. And so if you can swap out maybe your pre-dinner cocktails or your nightcap with something that doesn't have alcohol, it can make a huge difference for your health. And make it fun, right? Put it in a fancy teapot, make it feel festive. Hot cider is a great one. Okay. This one from our brain is a logic one about moving for self-love. So this is a bit of a mindset shift. So when we think about exercising around the holidays, a lot of times we hear, gotta get to the gym to work off that pumpkin pie. And it's a little bit of a healthier mindset if you shift your focus to thinking about exercise as a self-care tool or something that's going to make you feel good or burn off the stress. Maybe you want to take your family ice skating and experience the winter, get outside, or maybe just taking some me time. Moving during the holidays is really important for a lot of reasons, and I really encourage us to kind of change our mindset around to think about it as a stress reliever rather than a calorie reliever. Letting go of the perfect holiday is another way that you can kind of adjust your expectations and feel a little bit better. So, creating room for imperfection, having gratitude, feeling proud of the things that you have put on. I really love this idea of trying a new tradition because if it's totally new, it's not wrapped up in the nostalgia and the history and wanting to feel it the same as you did as when you were a kid. I like that idea. Keeping your holiday plans simple and realistic. If you plan to make your pies and then run out of time, it's okay to buy your pies. Focusing on the people that you're with rather than how it looks from the outside, and practicing acceptance. And then the last one I think is the most important. So, self compassion and giving yourself grace. If you ever find your mindset slipping into, I should do this or I shouldn't do that, one thing you can do to come back to that is say, says who? I should go to the gym. Says who? I should not eat this pie. Says who? We've got a mantra in our house that is, I'm just doing the best that I can. And anytime that we're starting to feel stressed or like we're inadequate, we just kind of remind each other, you're just doing the best that you can. Anybody else have a mantra that you like to use for self-compassion that you would like to share? Remembering that your choices do not define your self-worth, and no matter how the holiday goes, you are still a good person. You are still worthy of taking care of yourself. Oh, Moore says it's not that important. That's true. I like that one too. Ooh, Sophie, that's good. If you wouldn't say it to your best friend, don't say it to yourself. Those are all great. Very helpful. All right, so that brings us to 12:30. Here's our contact information if you have any questions about anything related to the program. I put the portal website on there even though it's December and there's not any activities in there to be logging right now. You can join us in January for our new program. So thanks for coming, everybody. I hope you have a great holiday.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. And this will be recorded if anybody wants to share it with any of your coworkers. Bye.